All right, folks, thanks for tuning in and watching that last little commercial. And welcome to tonight's stream where we are with Alex Turbyfield. Abbott, Alex, gotten to pleasures of working with him in the past before, but Alex is a software and game developer and artist at the University of Georgia. The digital media supervisor for ASIFA-South. You can tell us what that is in just a moment. And he's an artist and developer for indie games. Recent work includes a very cool game called Voice Ball. If you haven't heard about it yet, you need to look it up. It's a lot of fun. I will attest.
Cool.
It's too much fun to scream at something to try to make a ball move around. Anyway, the early grade science education game called Systems, and the augmented reality app for the ASIFA South Animation Conference and Festival. So, in addition, Alex has created animation project art for the Ultra Music Festival, medical and educational animations, architectural visualizations, and has worked with robotics and live performance. Dude, wow. All right. He also works as an education. He works as an education, frequently offering courses and lectures in animation, game development, and media. So that is enough about me bragging up about you, Alex. Hello, Alex. Talk to us.
Hey guys.
All right. This show is all yours.
Cool. All right, yeah. Well, thanks for the introduction. I hope everyone's having a good evening so far. One thing that ASIFA, that's ASIFA South. That's actually an international animation organization. I think it started in the 1960s, but we have a chapter in the southeast here that I think covers a lot of the states. I don't know exactly which ones, but a lot of them were doing our second conference sometime in the fall. So take a look out for that. I'm currently developing an app for that. Did one last year that was augmented reality. You hovered it over different cartoon characters and they come to life and stuff like that. It was really fun. So yeah, what I was planning on doing today was giving you guys a short introduction to Maya and just game art in general. I'm assuming a lot of the people that are tuning in are mostly probably on the programming side, maybe some sound developers or something like that. So I'm just going to give a basic kind of introduction as if you had never opened up a 3D programming toolkit, software, anything like that. So I'll be going over some of the jobs that we'll be doing and giving essentially just a basic overview of modeling, texturing, rigging, and animation. So first off, if you see my screen right now, this is Autodesk Maya 2016. I'm using a student version just to show you guys an actual full version. And that's because there are a couple of different options that you have. So I just brought up a screen of if you wanted to subscribe to any of this. So this is what I'm currently using, the full Maya. You can see it's kind of expensive, $185 monthly. For people who are mainly making game art, you have Maya LT as well. You can see only $30 a month, still kind of pricey. You get a lot of what Maya offers with that, except some of the stuff that doesn't come into game design as much. And that's what LT is mostly designed for, is game artists that are creating stuff that just essentially need to model, maybe animate, but don't need the things like dynamics, like fluid simulations or particle effects or anything like that. You might be doing that in your game system itself. So there's that. Now there's also, and I'll also say, if you're using MyLT and maybe someone or some of you guys are following along with me, the tools, like the keys and shortcuts, are mostly the same with this. It's mainly you're just missing out on a couple of features that Maya has that I'm not even going to bring up tonight. So there's that, but also you can't beat free. So there's also blender.org. So this is another 3D software program. It's totally open source, totally free. You can make whatever you want with it. But yeah, it's just kind of different flavors. Maya is something that is used throughout the game industry and film and animation industry. Just very powerful tool. Blender is very powerful as well. But like I said, it's open source. You don't get quite as much of actual like professional support with it, but it's still really nice. And at some point, it would be nice to actually do a tutorial on that as well. Um, if you're trying to follow along with Blender, some of the UI and the shortcuts, they won't be the same, but the stuff that I'll be going over is just the basics of essentially how 3D art modeling and animation works. So if you want to kind of follow along with me, you'll be getting stuff out of this that you could bring back to Blender and use there. There are a couple of other softwares you can use as well that they're not quite used as much in the game industry, but some people use them. One is Cinema 4D. I know a lot of people like to do motion graphics with that one. Seen some really cool stuff coming out of that. There's also stuff like Modo as well, and some older programs that are less used but have a fervent fan base. Lightwave is one. So any 3D modelers that out there that have been doing this for a while might have used that at some point. But yeah, enough talking about that. Let's just jump right into Maya. So essentially, I'm going to break it down into essentially three different jobs, how I'll put it. So those will be modeling and texturing. And that's going to be modeling is creating the 3D geometry of whatever you're going to build. Texturing is actually, so when you create a model, it's just going to look like, something gray probably. Texturing is actually going through and adding some color, maybe adding a little bit more definition, just bringing that character to life with maybe adding a little bit of specularity, so like shininess, stuff like that. So you have that, and I put those two together because a lot of times, if you're working professionally, the modeler oftentimes will be texturing because sometimes you'll do that to just add more definition to your character that you don't want to get with your actual modeling, just to keep poly count low. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move on. But yeah, there's modeling and texturing. Then there's rigging. So that's essentially you have your model. Now you're going to actually have to be able to do something to move it. And one of the most popular ways of doing that, and there are a couple of different ways of actually animating your character, but the biggest way and the way that you guys are probably most commonly used to seeing animation is through like a skeleton rig kind of thing. So you have bones, and those bones are actually moving the model. So that's essentially what rigging is, and I'll be showing a little bit of that. And then finally, you have your animation. So you have your 3D model, it's rigged up and ready to be animated. And essentially what you're doing is just manipulating those joints and just bringing your 3D creation to life. Now, I say that as in jobs because essentially if you're at like a big studio, a lot of times those things will be separated. So you'll have a modeler that's creating your characters or your scene that you're going through. Then you'll have someone that actually goes through and rigs it. It's a little bit more technical at that point. But still, I'm going to show it in a way that I hope is pretty approachable. And then, you can pass it along to your animator. Now, a lot of times, if you're in the case that I am, a lot of times where, you only have one or two actual artists on your team, sometimes you may have to do all of them or a handful of them. So I'm just going to essentially show you all of these things just so you can kind of get your feet wet, actually feel comfortable in the 3D modeling program. So I'm going to go ahead and start by creating a project. So down here, I'm going to project window. So I'm clicking on that. You can see I already have Shark project set up, and that's because I wanted to do a little bit of stuff up front so I wouldn't have to do anything with folders. If you're following along, you can go ahead and click new, and if you do that, you'll be able to type in under current project whatever you want to call it. I called it Shark project, but you can see down here it gives you all these folders. Now you're probably not going to have to use most of these for right now, but essentially scenes, that's where all of your 3D models are going to go. So like, in this project, I might have a shark model, but also maybe I want to create some 3D geometry for fish or, whatever I need. So those could be different scenes that I have in my shark project. I'll go to images. That could be stuff like textures or just things that I'll need for whatever geometry that I'm creating. Source images is a little bit different. That's essentially like reference images, and I'll show you that in a minute. And then you can add stuff like sound, scripts that you'll be using. You can do a little bit of programming, say in like Python. I'm not going to be showing any of that tonight, but you can see other stuff that's down here as well. So yeah, go ahead, click new, create your project. I've already created mine. I'm going to make sure that my project is actually set to it. Should be.
Hey, Alex, studies show that 98% of people can actually follow you right now.
Really?
Yeah. Like, start new.
Cool. Good.
Yeah, carry on.
Glad to see I haven't lost anyone yet, so cool. All right, so enough with that. Let's actually create something. So I'm going, actually, let's make sure that under here that we're in modeling. And I'm going to hit create, go down to Polygon primitives. A polygon is essentially, I'll just create one so you can see it. I clicked on cube. It's just like, you can see it's a cube, and it's made up of, I'm right clicking, I'm hovering over my cube, holding down right click. So you see all of these options. A polygon is made up of something called vertices. So you're probably familiar that, if you're into game design at all, but you have vertices, two vertices make up an edge, 3 or more make up a face, which is your this kind of shaded face here.
Hey,
so
Alex, if you don't mind, can you also, for our absolute beginners, tell us how you're flying around with your camera right now?
Oh, yeah, I totally should go over that. So, yeah, if you're completely new to Maya, so I'm on a Windows. If you're on a Mac, it's a little bit different. I believe the difference is, so I'm holding down Alt, the Alt key right now. I believe it's Command on a Mac. So what I'm doing is Alt and left mouse click will allow me to rotate around the scene like that. Holding down Alt, middle mouse button, dragging around will allow me to move. And right mouse button with Alt held down allows me to zoom in and out. Also, if you have the scroll wheel, you can just use the scroll wheel to zoom in and out. The right mouse button gives you a little bit more granularity, which a lot of times is really handy when you're kind of starting out or like trying to get in there and do fine detail work. So yeah, we've got that. So yeah, like I said, we have all of these different polygon primitives that we can create. So we can create a sphere. I showed you a cube. We can create a cylinder as well. So yeah, all these different things. So like I've clicked on this model. You see that it's turned green. That just shows that this model is active right now. So by the way, if you're like over here, like you're like moving around and you want to focus on your object, like you lost it, you can hit your F key and it will fit it back into the screen. As well as, you know, if you don't have your model selected, so like I just deselected my model right now. So hitting the F key, oh, well, it still did it because it's the only thing that's in the scene. But if I had a lot of things, it wouldn't know what to focus on. If I hit the A key, it'll focus on everything that's in the scene. Since I only have a sphere in here, it's just going to focus on that. But say I have a couple objects in here. Now if I hit A, it'll focus in on both of them. So hitting the F key to focus in on that. So you can see, so the object is green, showing that it's in object mode and this sphere is active. Object mode just means that I'm not actively moving specific vertices or edges, which I'll be doing later. But you can see right here, I have this little cursor with some arrows in it. You may not have that right now. You may have like something that looks like this, or maybe nothing at all. Now, these are just different transform tools that you have. And you can probably see, like if you look over here, these different options are getting highlighted. And I'll go through those really quickly. So right now, this is just selection mode. So it's this little cursor guy right here. You can also hit Q on your keyboard, and it'll go there. Right here is your move tool. So I click that. It's W on your keyboard, and all of these are going to just be right on that QWERTY right there, QWER. So this is the move tool. So you can see that you have these different arrows. So I can grab an arrow and move it in a general direction. And down here, I don't know how well you can see that, but that's kind of showing you your origin. So you see there's this red line, this green line, and this blue line. Essentially, that makes up your 3D space. So you have your X direction, your Z direction, and your Y direction going up and down. Some different programs handle that a little bit differently. Sometimes Z is up. In Maya, Z is forward. So if I grab this one right here, this arrow that originally starts out red, it turns yellow when you select it. But if I grab this arrow, I'll move it along the X plane. Grabbing the blue one, I move it along the Z, and grabbing this green arrow, moving it up and down on the Y plane. So, and now you're seeing, I'm moving around, and you're seeing it just snap back here. I'm just hitting Control Z there, undo like, most programs. How it's actually set up right now, you have a limited number of undos, and that's just dealing with memory. I think it's probably at default set to, I think around 20. I could be wrong about that number. In your project settings, you can actually go up and move that number up, reduce it, or just turn it off, which a lot of times can be helpful, but you have some sort of memory hit, which depending on your machine can be important. So yeah, that's the move tool. I can click on the center and it'll actually move it around in all these planes, all three planes at the same time. I suggest not doing that. So either grab these arrows or maybe these squares up here, which will move it in two planes at once. But what happens is if I'm trying to move this to like, let's say I'm trying to move this sphere to this position on the grid. If I grab here and just eyeball it and kind of move it here, now I'm going to rotate around, and it didn't actually do it. It moved it up a little bit. So you can see, I'll move it down. So you can see it kind of moved it up here. It wasn't exactly where I told it to be. And that's because it's kind of moving it based on where your camera is positioned. So especially starting out, just don't click on the square right in the center for the move tool. It will give you so much of a headache just trying to deal with that, especially like if you're doing something and don't realize that you're doing it, and then like 30 minutes later you go back and you see this vertices like 5 miles away from where it needs to be. It's horrible. Just starting out, it just, well, I tried not to do it, but there were times where I did and not good results. So that's the move tool. I'm hitting E, and this is the rotate tool. You can see this is highlighted here, so you can click on it there as well. Similar, you can see you have a red kind of curve here that will rotate it in the X-plane. This green circle here moves it in the Y. So kind of like, imagine your Y-axis, you had like a pole coming out of it. So you're kind of rotating it around that pole. So X, Y, and Z, moving it around the Z axis. And again, you can kind of click it in the center and move it around as well. Yet again, be careful. So now I'm hitting R, and that's bringing up the scale tool. So with that, again, Y, Z, and X. And again in the center. This might be a time where you would actually want to use this little icon here in the center, and it's because you will scale it uniformly, which can be important. So now let's pay attention to what's happening up here. So this is our channel box editor. So notice, now pay attention up here. When I move these values, so you can see the numbers in these scale X, Y, and Z over here, they're changing. So you can affect the sphere just by coming over here and adding in a value. So I do like 0.5. So it's scaled it by half. And it's by these units here, which, you have a grid right here. These units, by default, they're set to centimeters. So essentially, this has a length of 2 centimeters right now. Yet again, in your preferences, you can change that to whatever you want it to be. But a lot of times when you're modeling, so you have accurate results, just knowing these values and modeling it to scale can help out a lot. So yeah, so those are the main tools. I'm going to hit delete just to delete this guy right here. So I'm going to go through one of the most basic types of modeling that you can do, and you can actually model a lot of things doing it using this method, and it's called box modeling. And now it's called that because we use a cube. Before I do that, it's always great to have references whenever you're creating anything. So I created some images of a shark that we'll be modeling tonight. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold down the space bar. I'm clicking where it says Maya. So left clicking, holding it down, and I'm going to drag to the right view here. So I did that. It took me to my side plane. So it's just kind of constricting this camera to the side view, so I can't rotate it around. So I'm trying to rotate it. I'm just getting this kind of crossed out icon saying like, no, can't do that. And it's because we want to be situated. We want to just be handling things in the side. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click this little icon right here. It's the 1, 2, 3, 4th one over with the little card here on the grid. I'm clicking on that, and I'm adding an image plane. So what that is, and I've already loaded some in. So here's a couple of drawings that I did actually right before this event tonight. Well, a couple hours before, just because I actually wanted to show you guys what it's like modeling with a reference.
That's a better shark stick figure than I could draw.
That's cool. But yeah, so I'm going to grab this shark side ortho, and it's okay if you don't have it. Um, you can just kind of follow along modeling uh, just kind of by eyeball. But this way, I'll actually be able to model this guy uh, to the actual dimensions of this drawing. So here's my side view. I'm going to hold down the space bar, left mouse drag to I'll do my top view actually. It's a bottom image, but I'll go ahead and put it on the top. So yet again, clicking this, and I'm going to choose shark bottom ortho, throwing that in there. So you can see it through my image plane in there. It looks like it might be rotated the wrong way. Let me make sure. Yep. So I'm going to just rotate around. I'm going to hit E. There are other ways to do it. Actually, grab this guy again. So what I'm doing, I'm rotating it around the y-axis. So you can see when I rotated it, that value changed. So I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees. So I'm just typing in 90 here. So it's rotated around. It looks like it's matching up pretty well. Yeah, pretty close here. It's okay for the sake of tonight if it's not exact. But yeah, when you're doing this, make sure that these are to scale, so you wouldn't want it, looking like this or anything like that. And I feel like that'll become pretty apparent when we move forward. But yeah, with that, so I have these in as references. It's going to be in my way if it's just in the center of this grid right here. So I'm just going to move this down. And I could do that by grabbing this arrow, but you can also select Translate White here, come out into the view, and middle mouse click and drag, and it'll actually change this value as well. And I'm just moving it. I don't actually even need to see it in, this is called my perspective view, where I can essentially just freely rotate around. So did that, I'm just going to grab this shark, and I'm going to move it in the X direction. And I'm just going to move it back, get it out of my way. Because if we see, yet again, holding down the space bar, left mouse click and drag to my right view, it's still perfectly situated in my right view. Same for my shark, and it should be, yep. So it's there. Getting back to this view, I'm just holding down the space bar, middle mouse clicking, dragging up to perspective view. And now also what you can do is you can click on this icon right here with the 4 windows, and it'll just bring up 4 views at one time. So we have our top view right here. We have our side view here. This is the front, which if I had a front view of my shark, which a lot of times is very, very helpful to have, I could put it there as well and model with 3 images. For the sake of this model, 2 is fine. A lot of times it's also good to have a kind of 3/4 perspective, just to make sure that it looks good at an angle. Reference is always better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a cube. So I'm going up here, create polygon primitives. I'm going to click on this little box here first. And this brings up my options for the cube that I'm creating, because I can set it with like a different width. So like if I did that, you can see I had this kind of plank kind of thing going on. And it's because it's, I told it when I created the cube, I just wanted 7.6604 meters or centimeters. So I just want it to be 1. And there's a good chance it's already set up like this for anyone who's following along, but sometimes you might have something different here. But I just want all of these to be 1. So it's just very simple cube. I'm going to delete that guy. So hit create. So I got my cube in here. It's this beautiful gray cube. So what I'm going to do, and I'm just grabbing this, making it a little bit bigger so I can see. In my right view, I'm going to hit the 4 key. So you can see, and I'll do it up here as well. So hitting the 4 key, I'm going into wireframe mode. And that way I can just see through the cube because I don't need to see the shading on the shark right now. It's a little bit off center on the shark, so I'm just going to move it down a little bit. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to right click, hovering over this, right clicking, go to vertex. I'm just going to select over here. And in my right view, you can see that I actually grabbed both of these vertices at the same time. I could just go into edge mode and move it that way as well, but this is fine. So I'm just going to move it up to the tip of this fin right here, kind of just fit it in here. And this is what box modeling is. It's using a box and just modeling this out, just using this simple shape. I'm going to go back to 4 here up in my perspective view. So hovering over here, clicking in the window, I'm going to hover over the cube, right click, go to object mode, selecting the object, hit the 5 key. So shading this out, I want to position it a little bit better in the top view as well. So right clicking, vertex, grabbing these vertices, just moving it in a little bit. Same here. Oops. And moving it out. So just filling up that shark. So in my perspective view, right clicking, going to face. So I'm going to show you one of the most important tools that you'll be using while you're box modeling, or really most types of modeling in general, and that's called extrusion. So with this face selected, I'm going to go up to Edit Mesh, going down, and I'm going to click on Extrude. Actually, I'm going to click on the box first. It's probably set up just fine for you guys. I'm going to hit Edit and go to Reset Settings just to make sure that everything is set fine, because you can do a lot of kind of funky things in here, like making it twist as it extrudes and stuff like that. You'll see what it's about to do. But I just want it to be as basic of an extrusion as I can get, just one extrusion. So with that set, I'm going to hit Extrude. So I get this new tool right here. What I can do is I can take this guy and just kind of drag it out. And what I'm doing is I'm just trying to, like with my cube previously, going into vertex mode by right-clicking, hovering over vertex, selecting that. I am just going to kind of fit this into the shape of the shark right here. Like this. And then do it in the top mode as well. And it's okay if it looks blocky right now. It's supposed to, because essentially what we're doing is we're just blocking out the shark in general. So what I'm going to do is go up to Edit Mesh and hit Extrude. So did that. I can pull this out a little bit more. I'm going to right click again, go to vertex mode. Just kind of move the shape in. And I'm kind of moving this around to where the mouth area is going to be. So kind of where the mouth kind of shape would start to where the mouth shape would end. So kind of in there. I'll move this out a little bit more. And then make sure that bring this in the top view. I'm going to hit my 4 key just to go back into wireframe mode. So I can actually see what I'm doing. So that's pretty good. So the nice thing about this kind of 4-window setup is I can kind of see how it looks in my side view and my top view, and also be able to just kind of rotate around, make sure that nothing looks out of place, and like it's a pretty good shape so far. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to select this face again, and I'm just going to extrude out to this nose. Now I could keep going up here and going up to edit mesh and extrude. Instead of doing that, because that could take forever. And really, if you're a modeler, and especially if you want to be a professional modeler, get a job, all of this stuff is about speed. So can you create something that looks good, actually it serves its purpose, and can you get it done in a reasonable amount of time? So, and reasonable is generally, faster. So what I can do is hold down Control and E. So Control key, hit E. That just is the hotkey for extrusion. So I'm going to just kind of move this out to the end of the nose. Another thing that you can do, so this little square right here, this blue square, I'm going to click on it. You can see the center here turned into a cube. I can click and drag on that and kind of just pull it in, just to get that shape that I want. That's, essentially the same thing. I mean, it's just uniform scaling doing that. And I can kind of go in here as well and just kind of refine the shape. So I can go select these vertices, take my move tool and kind of move it in a little bit more. Take this guy, kind of move it up here as well. So something like that. So kind of a pointy nose. And I'm just kind of like breaking this down right now. I can, once it's starting to look a little bit more like a shark, I can actually go in here and start to refine. Maybe I don't want it to be quite this pointy or anything like that. So I can kind of go through and massage these vertices a little bit. So I'm going back here and I'm going to kind of build out the tail. So we have these little fins in here as well. I'm going to make sure that I have geometry that adds spacing for these tails, or little fins. And you'll see why once I get to that. So I'm just holding down Control, hitting E. I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to scale it in by clicking this cube, dragging it in a little bit, matching that shape. Let's look here. Looks pretty good. And now this, I mean, a shark, like, I feel like a lot of kind of living creatures are practically a tube. You have the mouth that food goes in, the other end food comes out, and then, other than that, you just have your appendages. So humans have arms, sharks have fins, kind of thing like that. So a lot of, organic character design, it's going to be a tube with extra things on it. I kind of like to see it that way. Maybe other people don't, but that's cool. All right, so making sure that I have this face selected. Make sure also that you are just clicking and selecting one face. Like I can, drag over and do this marquee kind of thing, or selection box rather. But the problem is, like, say I was trying to like grab this cube like that kind of thing. If I move around, I grabbed all of this, and if I hit the extrude key, I'm pulling all of this out, and it's kind of crazy. Sometimes that actually gives you something that you want. In this case, it does not for me. Actually, I'm going to move this a little bit further out here. Something like that. So with this selected, I'm going to hit Control E again for extrude. Point it out a little bit more. And Getting this cube, I'm going to scale it in some more. I'm going to move it up a little bit as well. Something like that. You can see it's still fitting in here. This image isn't exactly matching this one. That's fine for what we're doing. And I might skip some of these fins for time. Hitting Control E to extrude again. Just going to pull it out all this way. Scale it down. Like this. And now I'm going to hit Control E again. I'm extruding. I'm actually going to pull it all the way out to the base of this tail, kind of like this. And I'm going to click on this red cube, kind of just drag it in a little bit, make it flatter. So now this kind of set up, and it's matching pretty well. What I can do, I'm going to click this top face. So on the top of my shark, at the same time, I'm holding down Shift, and I'm going to click the bottom face as well. So I have the top and bottom faces selected. I'm going to hit Control E to extrude. Now, if I pull up this blue arrow, you can see it pulls it in both of these directions. So top and bottom, kind of like this. By the way, this is kind of extrude options, so you can kind of mess with some of these settings in here if you want. I'm not going to mess with that right now. So doing that, let me see if I can grab. Yeah, so I can't really move them in this direction, kind of like that. You can actually click, if you can see this little circle with a line in it. So I'm clicking that. Now I can actually pull it back and make this match. And that's going on because of something called normals, which, you know, if you're familiar with game design, you probably have a fair idea of what normals are, but it's why when I was pulling that arrow key earlier, the normals were going in a different direction. So that's why this guy was going this way, the guy was going that way. So what I'm going to do, I'm just selecting these top vertices up here. Yet again, I could be selecting edges. Actually, I'm going to do that just to show you guys. I'm going to select, I did that quickly. I'm going to right click, go to edge, select this edge, hit my W key. I'm just going to pull it back a little bit. Actually, I'm going to match it up here. And it's okay if the top of my shark fin is different from the bottom down here. And you actually do have reflection settings in here as well. So if you did want it to be exact, that would be fine. And a lot of times, like if you're doing a human, when you're modeling, you would want to have that stuff actually mirror itself. For the reasons of rigging to animation, just kind of gets a little bit more important at that point. So I have this. I want to add in a little bit more definition to this fin here. So I'm going to right click, go to edge, select the edge. I'm going to hold down Control and right click. Hover down to this edge ring utilities, edge ring and split. So another very useful tool that you can use. And hopefully that's actually the last modeling tool sorry, that I show you tonight. And that's because I get just so much mileage out of modeling just using extrusions and edge loops or edge rings. So by the way, I'm going to undo this. If I double click on an edge, I'm in edge mode again. So right click, go to edge. Double clicking on this selects the whole edge loop here. So now I can move this whole edge and just kind of like fit it around this kind of shark fin. Do the same thing down here. I'll do that a little bit more slowly. So selecting this edge, Control, right click, edge ring utilities, edge ring and split. So kind of a zigzag pattern there. And that's the nice thing about these markup menus is you can just really quickly like hold down space and just like zip through these menus really fast. And it really comes in handy when you're kind of modeling quickly. Oh, yeah, have my whole edge ring selected, so double clicking on that edge, just kind of moving it in a little bit, fitting that. I'm not fitting it perfectly, and it's just, you know, I'm not exactly happy with how I drew this. Drew it kind of quickly, and I'm like, I can do a better shape than that. So that's fine. So we can see.
An artist is never happy with his work or her work.
So true. All right. So we have our basic kind of shark look here. I'm going to actually, in this perspective window, I'm just going to slap the space key, the space bar, and it just sends me back to perspective mode. So you can see we have our basic shark model. I'm right clicking, going to object mode because I don't need to select my vertices or anything like that. Hitting F to focus in on the shark again. So, kind of looks like a shark, right? A little bit. But we really want it to be a little bit more smooth. So what I can do with the shark model selected, hit the 3 key, and you can see we actually have kind of a quasi-looking shark, but minus the mouth and the fins and stuff like that. And I was actually planning on creating a mouth. We're kind of short on time because I'm going a little bit slower. But yeah, so I'm not going to worry about modeling the shark mouth just for the sake of time, but that's something that you can do. But what I'm going to do, so the 3 key is essentially like approximating what the model would look like if we actually smoothed it. So it just gives us a better idea of what this shark is going to look like as we smooth it. And this is getting into something some of you may be familiar with called level of detail. A lot of times it's shortened to LOD. But that's essentially just how much definition this shark model has. Like how smooth is it? You know, how realistic does it look, kind of? Because, you know, if we're creating like a low-end phone or mobile game or something like that, and we had like a lot of these shark models in it or something like that, maybe we want something a little bit with less polygons. So we would have something a little bit more like this. Whereas, you know, you're creating like a AAA title or something like that, you probably want it a little bit more smooth like this. So that's kind of like your level of detail. So a lot of times, you know, it's all a balancing act, you know. If you've ever made a game, you probably know that. So yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and create the fin, because, come on, without the fin, is it really even a shark? So I'm going to actually, you know, I'm going to put down the space bar, go back to my perspective view. I'm going to click on this guy right here, just to go into this view, so I can see where my actual fin is. So it's right around here. So I'm going to select that face up here. So right-clicking on the model, selecting face. So I'm hovering over it. You can see down here it turns red. So we know we're hovering over the right face. I'm going to hit Control-E to extrude. Now I'm going to just grab that red cube right here, just to scale it in a little bit. Like this. Get a little bit wider. I'm going to hit Control. You know what? I'll pull it up a little bit. Let's give it a little bit of a base. I'm going to hit Control-E again. Pull this up. Right-click. Grab the vertices right here. So just selecting these. W for my move tool. Just kind of shape this out a little bit more, kind of like this. So yeah, so we had the beginnings of our fin. I'm actually going to right click here. Actually, with these selected, I kind of want these to be a little bit closer in. So I'm going to hit my R key, scale this in a little bit, something like that. And then just grab all of these. Let's go, yeah, scale them in. Just get kind of a pointy top up here. And I kind of want this like swoop here that we have going on in the fin. So I will go to my edge mode, select an edge, control, right click, hold down, edge ring utilities, and split. Grabbing my edge loop, W, move it here, just moving it out. Right click, vertex mode, smooth this in a little bit, something like that. And at this point, you know, we're getting from boxing it out to actually kind of refining. So I could go in and just keep on adding edge loops in here and really kind of breaking down this model like this. And it's fine. So for the sake of actually showing you guys kind of rigging and some actual animation, we're going to forego any of these other fins. You know, it's probably fine, you know, moving along with this. So we'll keep going. So going into object mode by right clicking, going here, selecting my model. If I go up to, let's see, let me make sure. It's mesh smooth. So if I click that, you can see it actually smooths the model out a little bit. Also, I will take a little bit of time just to tell you something that I have not done yet, and that's save my scene, which is very bad practice. So I'm going to go ahead and do that.
I was wondering when that save button was going to get
hit.
hit.
Yeah, no, should have come up like 30 minutes ago. So I'm going to go ahead and save the shark, you know, and just thank my lucky stars that it did not crash in that amount of time. So yeah.
So why would that be? Why would it crash?
Because Maya is just like that sometimes. I think it's gotten better in time, but I remember back in the day, like, you know, you could just click on a random thing. Like I could like click over here or something and I don't know, you know, just do some sort of operation and, you know, depending on like how heavy your scene is or something, or just Maya just didn't like that operation on your computer, it might cause it to crash. Yeah. Now, one thing that'll actually help with that as well is another thing I haven't done yet, which is delete my history. So you see all of this stuff right here? That's all of my construction history. So everything that I've done so far, for the most part, has been saved in memory. So I don't need all of that stuff. Sometimes it comes in handy, but especially when you're modeling, when you get to certain steps, you don't want to keep this around because it just kind of bogs down your memory. So I'm going to go up to Edit, Delete by Type, History. And when I do that, you can see it just clears it out. And that'll save you from potential crashes or anything like that. If you're working on something that has, you know, a lot of polygons after some time, if you keep that history around, you'll just notice like this machine will start chugging, really. Frame rate drops. Just good to get that history out when you don't need it. Now I say that at this point, now there's a texturing process as well that I'm actually going to skip over. But essentially,
yeah, I think we got a part 2 coming up.
Yeah, it seems like texturing can be its own beast. Like Maya has some painting kind of stuff in it. I never use it. Like sometimes I use it for like teaching very simple classes where all we're using is Maya. But otherwise, essentially, I'll take it into a different program. And I use Substance Painter a lot to actually paint this model, and that I'll actually take this shark model out of Maya and bring it into Substance Painter and actually paint on the model itself. You can also do something. It's called a UV map. Essentially, what you do, and you had to do this regardless. Essentially, so you have this model. You almost have to like pelt it, almost like essentially take this 3D model and kind of lay out the texture coordinates or like almost like the skin of this, kind of lay it flat so nothing's overlapping or anything like that, so you can actually paint it, because otherwise you'll get some weird funky kind of stuff going on. So yeah, there's that, and that can take just as long as this modeling process, really. So I'll go ahead and skip that because I wouldn't have time to texture the shark anyway. But what I can do with the amount of time that we have left is actually kind of show you the basics of rigging and modeling. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to actually make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to actually add in a skeleton for the shark so that I can actually manipulate it. Because what I could do, I could grab the shark, take the move tool and like kind of like animate it like this, but like then you just have a torpedo or whatever. Really what you want is like something like, this kind of fluid kind of motion where the tail is moving back and forth and stuff like that. And to get that kind of look, you need to add a skeleton. So good practice. We just deleted history. It's good to delete history right before you put this in, because deleting history will actually break your connection to the skeleton that we put in here. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to actually go up to this drop-down menu. I'm going to choose rigging. I'm going to go to skeleton. I'm actually going to go pretty fast here just to show you guys essentially how this works. So I'm going to say this shark moves from its head. So I'm going to just, in my side view, click here and add a bone. It's pretty big here. I can actually go in and modify the size of these joints. I'm not too worried about it right now, though. But I'm actually going to just click through here and kind of match it. Actually, I'm going to undo that one. Match it along these kind of the edge loops here, and kind of where I imagine the spine of the shark would be. Yeah, I'll put one here. Yeah, because I feel like I would get a lot of motion kind of in this back area right here. And then one for the tail back here. So you have that. I'm going to hit Q. So I have this whole chain selected. Now, another thing that I would be doing at this point, going through all of this, I would be naming what I'm doing. So this shark model, I'll select this up here in my channel box editor. I'm going to call this shark. And then if I had time, I would actually be naming these joints. So I'd probably say like, nose joint, maybe head joint, spine 1, spine 2, spine 3, spine 4, spine 5, kind of stuff like that. But yeah, I'm just kind of moving along so we can show this off. Another thing I'm going to do is modify and freeze transforms. And what this is going to do, it'll just zero out all this translation stuff. So do that. So now I'm going to grab this first joint right here, shift select the shark, skin, bind skin. So now, spacebar, I'm going to get a shading so you can actually see the joints, X-ray joints. So if I kind of grab these guys, just holding shift to grab this kind of chain here. Gonna bring up my E key. You can see we have a shark that animates. So a thing that I'm skipping over now is this is kind of working okay, but maybe I don't like how this particular chain is actually affecting the shark. So like maybe I want this chain right here to influence this whole fin or something like that. I could go in and do something called weight painting, which is essentially telling each vertice what they're going to pay attention to. So like you're going to follow this joint so much, you're going to follow this joint so much, just to make it look as I don't really want to say realistic, but yeah, essentially like that, you know, something that looks good to me. But so here's my 1 minute animation kind of lecture here. So down here is our time slider. This is what we use to animate. So we have this. I'm going to click on this guy right here. This is just my animation preferences, this little running guy right here. And I'm just making sure that the animation settings are set how I want them to. So I want to keep this at play every frame, but this max playback speed, it's set to real time 24 frames per second, which, you know, if you follow film at all, standard filmmaking was done in 24 frames per second. I'm actually, you know what, I'll keep it at 24 frames per second for right now. It's fine. A lot of times for games, I'll animate in 30 frames per second, and I'll go into preferences to do that. But 24 frames per second is fine. What I'll do here, so I had this chain selected, and I just selected all of these. I'm going to go to my first keyframe here, or my first frame rather. So, you know, I'm just left mouse clicking and dragging here, making sure that I'm on my first frame. So I'm just rotating in the Y direction. So I'm going to move this out kind of like this, something like that. Looks all right. I'm going to select rotate Y, right click, and key selected. And you see this turns red, this line turns red. That shows that we put down something called a keyframe, and that's just saving this pose that we just did for these joints. So it just saved that this these joints have all rotated about 5.5 degrees. So we'll do that. I'll go out. Let's say you know, it does one rotation, and this is good for, like, you know, if you're making a shark game, you just want a swimming animation that lasts 1 second. So we're at 24 frames per second. So that would mean that our 24th frame would be 1 second. So I'm going to go half that, 12th frame, with all of these joints still selected. I'm just going to rotate Y. The other direction. I'm doing it about the same. I could actually put in the specific value, like negative whatever it was, 5.4 or something. Not too worried about it right now. But what I can do is click here on my first frame. Now I want my last frame to actually be the same, the very same as my first frame, because I want this to match up and seamlessly loop. So what I'm doing is with my first frame selected, I'm going to middle mouse drag out to frame 24. I'm going to right click, key selected. So now you can see that we have something going on here. So, and I could actually even kind of set this up to loop, but a simple way to kind of preview it is just kind of shorten this down to 23 frames. I'm doing it at 23 because frame 24 is the exact same as frame 1. So if I had 1 to 24, you would have one frame that would be the same. So you'd have like a short little kind of stop there. But just hitting play, the play key here, we have our looping animation. So cool. One thing that I skipped also is generally the person that does the rigging, so puts the joints in here, generally you don't actually move these joints, like animate with the joints specifically. You actually create controls. So what the person rigging would do is create these NURB circles per se. And I've gotten creative and like created specific shapes to kind of like really give you an idea of what a particular kind of control is meant to do. Because what I'm doing is I don't want to actually animate on the joint. I want to animate with these controls. So I would kind of like match this up and create controls for all these joints. And then actually connect all these controls to the joints, because then I could animate with the control itself. And when I do that, I can actually limit certain things. So like right now, I can actually move this control around, rotate it, scale it. I wouldn't want to do all that. So like say I didn't want to move it, I could select these channels and lock selected. So you can see they kind of grayed out a little bit. So now you can see I have my move tool selected. It's grayed out. So trying to grab it, can't. So I can't move it. Try to change these values in here. Can't do that as well. It's stuck in place. But what I can do, since I didn't lock my rotate values, I can still rotate it around. And that's really helpful for like, let's say you are rigging it, but you're not animating it. You're passing it on. You have, you want to set this up for the animator so that it is as foolproof as possible. They can't mess it up really. So, maybe this control is never meant to be moved. You just lock this off. You can even restrain these values. So like maybe you only want the Y to rotate 30 degrees. You could set up a limitation on that as well. It becomes really helpful. So essentially, something like that is set up. So you could essentially take this shark model, have it selected, select the joints as well. I could just go in here and export selection. And you have a lot of different options. I like FBX, a lot of game engines accept FBXs, and they retain animation information and all that good stuff that you'll want in your game. So, you can save this out. I can save it to my desktop and just call it Shark. And then I have my FBX export of my Shark that I can move on and bring it into a game engine like Unreal or Unity and just go from there.
Cool.
So yeah, that's about it. A couple other things, this is just, I showed you one type of modeling, this box modeling. You can sculpt as well. You can edge extrude, stuff like that. Animation, there's something called blend shapes, which are good for facial animation. So a lot of different tools, but what I showed you is a good kind of like, it'll get you a lot of
Oh yeah,
Go on.
this is a
Feel
great introduction to Maya for sure.
cool.
Much better than just making a bouncing ball.
Yeah, yeah. Which I mean, honestly, for an hour, like I could spend this whole hour, making a bouncing ball. I have done that before. So
Well, hey, this has been awesome. Hopefully, let's schedule a part two to this. Like if you
yeah,
want to continue making the shark, or if you want to try something new. So thank you very much, Alex, for doing this tonight. Working in Maya, getting you guys familiar with Maya.
I
And
will.
also to end it off, thank you very much to our Patreons. Remember, the GGDA is a non-profit organization, so your Patreon support will help game developers and even 3D animators and artists. And just real quick, March 1st. No, I'm sorry, that's tonight. March 5th, 2018. That's right. The GGDA Athens meeting will be at the Driftmeyer Engineering at UGA, right next door to Alex, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
To discuss the upcoming Game Jam on April 13th. And then that's the Athens Game Jam. And then Atlanta, March 13, 2018. The meeting is going to be at Keneva on making VR games. So very cool to check out. And finally, if you're watching this anywhere YouTube, check out our streamings. We do it on YouTube. We do it on twitch.tv. We also do it on Mixer. All three of those are / Georgia Game Devs. Again, thank you very much, Alex. This was a great uh,
That
introduction. So,
was great. Thanks for having me.
excellent. All right, well, folks, we'll look into seeing you in the future on more streams. Good night.